can't hear nothing, right?
No, go ahead.
Hello, 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 hello. I think that's on you. Because my sound down here is muted. But up top, I got it undone. So that way.
So your volume on your computer is turned all the way down to 0?
Mm-hmm.
Can anybody hear us yet?
They in there?
Mm-hmm.
It's already on?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Amy can hear.
Yes. Okay. Are you muted still?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're muted. On the panel, you're muted? Okay, mute on the panel. They can hear it through yours. Thank you for everybody that's commenting. I appreciate that. The handout is in, if you've got your little GoToMeeting on the side, the handout is down towards the bottom right above chat. And that is the handout that's going to correspond with this training. We appreciate you all joining us today. Since you guys can all hear us, and looks like almost half of the people that registered are here, and we got more coming in fast. So we'll do a little housekeeping first. I've got Jasmine Harris here to help me field questions. My name is Kara Poli. We are compliance monitors with the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. This training is going to be over monitoring reviews from the beginning to end. So hopefully you can get all your burning questions answered. And we look forward to hearing your questions and helping you with any issues that you all might have. We do have a questions box there. I think some of you have already found it to tell me that you can hear, which I appreciate. So if you will type your questions in there, and then Jasmine will let me know when we've got some questions, and we'll go through those as part of the training. And so Jasmine will kind of wave her hands at me and show me that we've got questions, or let me know that they're there so we can stop. This is an informal training in the sense that it doesn't have a lunch break, obviously, or breaks. So this will be, you know, kind of the length of time will be no more than 2 hours, and the length of it will depend on you guys completely, because we definitely want to answer your questions. I do see a couple people with their hands up, and I saw that somebody just asked about the handout. Down towards the bottom on your GoToMeeting dashboard, there is where it kind of tells you like the questions line. It's one of the gray lines. It says handouts, 1 of 5. And that is where the handout is. If you are unable to find that, please let me know. So I don't have another way to send the handout other than to put it in this little sidebar. If you are unable to find the handout, you can follow along with us during the training, and then I can email you the handout later. If you will email me, I will put my email in the chat right now. So if you are unable to get the handout and that is something you would like to have for future reference, please shoot me an email and I will get that sent to you, but it is in the sidebar. I did confirm that that's there. It's a PDF document that you can open and save and take notes on if you want to. All right, so in the interest of time, because you guys' time is valuable, we're going to go ahead and get started. And like I said, Jasmine is watching the chat, the questions box. So if you have questions or if anything needs to be addressed, please put it in that questions box and we will get you an answer that way. So again, my name is Kara Poli. I'm a compliance monitor with the department, and some of you have probably seen me at monitoring reviews. Jasmine Harris is off camera, but she is here with me, and you probably know her from monitoring reviews as well. And if you don't, you'll get to know us through this training, and we look forward to helping answer all your questions. So this training addresses monitoring reviews from start to finish. So we're going to talk about from getting the notification all the way to closing the review. So hopefully this is something you guys find helpful and beneficial and are able to use it in your real life applications. So our contact information, the department does have a building downtown in Austin. And if you're ever downtown and you just want to see where the magic happens, this is where you want to drive by. The the mailing address is the PO box though. So if you need to send something, if a monitor or somebody from asset management or somebody at the department asks you to mail something, you're going to send it to that mailing address. That's the PO box. If you need to contact the department, but you're not sure who specifically to talk to, you can call this 512 phone number or this 800 number, which is toll free in Texas. And then we also have a website, which is going to be the best way to contact us. We do have a contact list on that website. So everybody that works at the department is listed on that website, depending on what department they work in or what division they work in at the department. And currently, a lot of us are telecommuting, and so the easiest way to reach us is going to be through email, so that you can send us an email and we can contact you or set up a time to chat on the phone if we need to, or we can email, we can correspond through email. But definitely, we do still travel, and we are still doing monitoring reviews in person and stuff. So we're not always at a computer or at a phone, and so as you know, email's kind of always been a really good way to reach us, and that still continues to be true. So there is a place in CMTS, and if you're not familiar with CMTS, we do have a training on that as well. But our CMTS is the Compliance Monitoring and Tracking System. And this is the place where we as the department are going to communicate with you guys as the owners and managers of our affordable housing communities out in the field. So why the contact information in that system matters is because that's where the notification of the on-site review is going to be uploaded. So when we are ready to come out to your property or do a desk file audit or file review, we are going to go into CMTS and we're going to do all the notifications through CMTS. So if the email address is inaccurate or incomplete or missing, or it's an old management company or somebody who no longer works at your group, then you're not going to get the notification as timely as you would if that contact information was up to date. So I definitely recommend checking on that periodically, set up a process in your with your company or your property or your management group or your ownership group that's going to allow for CMTS to be updated regularly and maintained regularly. Management should also be checking the CMTS attachments regularly, as well as the ownership groups, but you also need to verify in CMTS that all the contact information entered is correct, including email addresses and phone numbers. And we would like to make sure that the owner contact is an owner contact and not a property management or management company contact. We do hear some feedback from owners that have had their CMTS set up that they're with the management company as the ownership contact as well as the management company contact. And that is just going to take away that responsibility from the owner to where, because they're the ones ultimately responsible for any of those notices that are going to go out from the department or any of that communication. And so if they don't have an email address set up in there, then they're not going to get that. And that's not really an excuse for them to not comply with any of our requests. But it is something that we've kind of seen off and on as a problem. Additionally, you want to make sure that the phone numbers are correct, because if we come out to monitor your property and we can't find it, or the office is closed, or there's a sign on the door or something, when we're out in the field, what we're going to have access to is the compliance profile that we print from CMTS. So if that doesn't have a correct phone number on it, we're not going to be able to reach that on-site management group or on-site staff, and that's pretty vital that we would be able to do that. So management also needs to receive the automated email notices. However, as I said before, it is vital for the owner to also receive those notices, since the owners are ultimately responsible for any non-compliance. Now, I know there are instances where the owners are part of the management group and it's kind of all one entity, but what we don't recommend is that every email goes to Kara@pandorasprings.com, and that there are several people who are receiving the emails or an email group that are receiving those, so that there is a good, clear way for the property affiliates to be contacted. Again, the owner is the one who's going to be subject to administrative penalties and or debarment for noncompliance. So they need to receive and review notices and supervise corrections by management. So the owner should not really take a back seat in this. The owner should definitely be kind of on the forefront when there's stuff going on for the property, so that they're aware of what's being submitted to the department and what needs to be handled by the department. I think we've got some questions that we can answer. So I'm going to mute myself and Jasmine's going to unmute.
Okay, the first question is CMTS the same as the TDHCA housing contract system?
So the question is CMTS the same as the housing contract system? It is not. The housing contract system deals more with the asset management side of things, and the compliance monitoring and tracking system, we use it as, it kind of deals with everything, and it's got all the property contact information. It's our virtual file for the property. We no longer keep paper files, so the attachment system is going to be basically a virtual file or filing cabinet for that specific property. So these are two different systems that we're referencing. Are there more questions? Okay, that was our only questions. I do see that somebody has their hand raised. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box. We're not going to unmute anybody or anything, and you are welcome to type any questions in the chat box that you would like. That way we can kind of keep this going. So with the monitoring review, the lead monitor for the review will upload a notification letter into the CMTS attachment system for the development. This letter is going to tell you what day and what time monitors will be at the development. Please keep in mind that that is an estimate. If the prior reviews finish early or do not finish on time, then we may arrive sooner or later. So for instance, I'm going to be out in the field next week. I'm out in the field for 4 days. So if your letter told you that I was going to be there Friday morning at 8 a.m., don't be surprised if I show up on Thursday or call you and say, hey, I'm going to come on Wednesday, because things are kind of fluid when we're out in the field. And our goal is to conduct our reviews as quickly and efficiently and accurately as we possibly can. So if a review that we thought was going to take 3 or 4 hours only takes 2 hours, or a review that we thought was going to take 2 hours ends up taking 3 or 4 hours, it's going to adjust those other items. We will do our best to contact you, but be aware that during the week that your notification indicated as the date of your review is the week that we are going to be in your area, and we may show up anytime during that week, dependent upon how the rest of our reviews go. And you can reach out to your lead monitor if you have questions about that, or if there's something going on, maybe you have a management conference on the Monday and Tuesday of that week, but your review is scheduled for Thursday. Communication is key. So if you can contact your manager, your monitor when you receive that letter, if you know of anything going on during the week that might prevent the review being moved up, then that would be ideal. Monitors are going to then conduct the review, either a desk or an on-site review, in accordance with the program requirements under which the property operates. So if you have multiple programs, you're going to have multiple pieces to your review, and it's not just going to be a standard housing tax credit review or a standard home review. We're going to look at all the different program requirements. After we've conducted the monitoring review, we're going to then issue a monitoring report. This is going to detail any issues of non-compliance, and it's going to offer technical assistance if we noted any while we were out or while we were conducting the review on any items that may help avoid non-compliance in the future. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those things later on in this training. There is a 90-day corrective action period in which the issues, if any, appear or are present during the review can be corrected. This can be extended for good cause for an additional 90 days, but written approval is required for an extension, and there's a process in the letter that's going to outline that. And the request must be submitted prior to the end of the original corrective action period. So If your corrective action period ended yesterday and today you told me you needed a 90-day extension, that doesn't comply with this requirement. So make sure that you guys are paying attention to that end of corrective action period. So there's the monitoring review, we do what's called a pre-review, or where we here in the department kind of call that our prep. So the notification letter is going to provide a deadline for you to submit pre-on-site documentation. The due date is incredibly important because the IRS now only allows us 15 days to notify you. So you're going to get your notification 15 business days before we're going to come out to your property. So if maybe that comes in on a Thursday and nobody checks it till Monday, you've already lost 2 days of prep time to get us that pre-on-site documentation. So you want to be sure that this is why it's incredibly important for somebody to be keeping an eye on CMTS, just in case an email notification doesn't go out. Once the pre-on-site documentation is submitted, the monitor is going to prepare for the review using documentation submitted, along with the land use restriction agreement and any other available items or program requirements. The monitors are going to arrive at the property for the monitoring review, or the monitor will upload a file request list into the CMTS attachment system that's going to give on-site staff a file list for the review. If the review is being conducted as a desk monitoring review, the number of files expected to be uploaded will be given in the letter. If the upload cannot be completed within 24 hours of the notification letter, that's the first letter where we said, hey, we're going to conduct this, you need to notify the monitor immediately and say, hey, I can't upload 62 files in one day. Is there a way we can break that up into 2 days, or kind of whatever your property need is based on the technology that's available? Do we have some questions, Jasmine? All right, perfect. Oh, I have to mute. Sorry, I'm new here. Y'all let us know if you can't hear Jasmine. We're going to try to just use the mic on my computer.
Is there anything that we need to do as a sub guarantee with the CMTS if we have not received a notification or a monitoring?
I don't think I understand the question.
Like, do we need to create a login or something else?
Oh, to be able to access CMTS? Is that the question? Yes, you will need to be able to access CMTS, and each property should have an admin of accounts, and that's who would need to get you set up with a login. If you don't have that, there is a section on our website dedicated to online reporting, and at the very bottom of that section, it has a CMTS requests email address, and you can send them an email. They do take 3 to 5 business days to respond, simply because of the amount of requests that inbox gets. So don't expect an immediate response, but you can send them an email and they can provide you some more information. If you're a brand new property or a new management company to a property, there's also some information as to how to sign up for for access or for a change of contact in the CMTS system. Additionally, we have a pretty detailed training on CMTS that you can review. So if that's something you're interested in, you can send me an email and I can get you directed straight to that. What other questions do we have, Jasmine?
How much advance notice do you give for a review?
So the monitoring reviews, like that very first bullet that's on your screen now, you're going to get a 15 business day notification. So if we're coming out, like I'm going out next week into the field, those folks were notified on August 31st and September 1st. So it seems like a very short notification period, but that is the IRS's requirement, and they only allow us to have the 15 days.
Will an audit ever be scheduled on a Monday and end up the week before?
If you do, we do have, can you unmute Amy? We've got our manager of compliance that's also going to interject here. There is, if you get a monitoring or a notification that you have a monitoring review on a Monday, there is very little probability that somebody's going to come the week prior, and we don't we don't oftentimes go out on Mondays, but sometimes monitors have scheduling conflicts and we have to go out on like a Monday. Maybe the reviews that we have are going to take all week. Maybe we've got something we've got to be back for on Thursday, so we have to do a Monday to Thursday trip. So if you get a Monday review, you can probably bet that it's going to be on that Monday, but you can reach out to your monitor with that notification if you have questions about it. I think Amy Hammond had something she wanted to add. Are you able to unmute her?
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Okay, Amy, you're unmuted.
I just wanted to check. I think someone in the audience is with the contract monitoring, and that's why they're asking about the housing contract system and about CMTS and about this training will not pertain to you. This is a multifamily compliance monitoring review, and your reviews are very different than our reviews. Just by some of the questions you guys are getting, I just double checked with Ernest, and it does sound like you might have somebody there from subrecipient monitoring.
Okay, so unfortunately, this training is not going to pertain to that division. But if you are that person or those people and you aren't sure who to reach out to, you can send me an email. Remember, I put my email in the chat box. You can send me an email and I can help get you directed to the right folks. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, the next question is, what do you consider good cause for an extension?
That's going to depend on the review. What were the issues of non-compliance? So, for example, if you have, now keep in mind, I don't review the extensions. We have a group of monitor that's responsible for that. If your only issue of non-compliance is that your tenant rights and resources guide was not posted and accessible or not compliant, and you wait and at the end of the 90 days tell us you need another 90 days to bring that current, that might not be good cause for, that might not be an extension that's granted because it's a rights and resources guide that should be able to be updated pretty quickly. Or if you tell us that you need an extension because you just didn't read the letter until day 85 and now you can't get the stuff done within the last 5 days of the 90 days. So you want to be sure that you are looking at that monitoring report, pretty quick when you receive it and asking the monitor questions. We do have that as kind of a whole section of this training. What other questions you got, Jasmine?
We are an ESG rapid housing and homeless prevention provider. Do the same guidelines apply to us?
They do not. That is going to be a different type of review. So you may want to reach out to the folks that you communicate with regularly about your program. And if you aren't sure who those folks are, send me an email and I can get it forwarded to the right group.
Okay, the next one is, do you review the files on site or will we need to upload files?
So your notification letter is going to indicate how this review is going to happen. It's going to tell you that this is either going to be a desk monitoring review or an on-site monitoring review. And if it's an on-site monitoring review and you don't keep paper files, you only do digital files, you need to communicate that to the monitor so that they can then tell you how that's going to change. And if it's a desk monitoring review, you will for sure upload your files within accordance of the request for those file reviews. But if it's an on-site file review, we're going to come to your property and we're going to sit in your community center or your office, kind of whatever your space has, and we're going to review the files that way.
Okay, for clarity, is the CMTS relevant to monitoring for ESG grantees?
No, that is a different program and monitored differently. So that would be something where you could reach out to the folks that you communicate with about your property, or you can shoot me an email and I can get you to the right people.
And this entire training is not relevant to them?
Correct, that is correct.
Okay, and then the last one is someone wants to know the CMTS website. I can put it in the chat box.
Okay, Jasmine's going to put the CMTS website in the chat box. So that should be able to help with that question. That gets us caught up?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. These are all great questions. And I apologize for the folks that are here on accident. I did not, I didn't anticipate that. So I apologize for that. All right, so the monitoring review for the on-site staff, we want you guys to make sure that the on-site staff are aware of the on-site visit and that it may be anytime during the week scheduled. So I know for me, I like to reach out to the properties that I'm going and I call the on-site people to see, is there going to be a parking issue? Is there going to be, is there a place where I can set up my laptop? That kind of thing. Not all the monitors do that. Some of them rely on you guys to call us and communicate that. That's just something that I try to make time to do. But with that, there are times that the on-site folks have no idea we're coming. I know I went to a review back in February or March, and I arrived on site and nobody had told them that I was coming. So the manager wasn't there. The maintenance guy was not comfortable letting me in. He didn't know where the files were, that sort of thing. So that became a problem, which is why now I call people the Friday or Monday before I go out, just to make sure that everybody on site is aware that I'm coming. But that's just something for those of you that are not on site, that are above an on-site group. Make sure that you're letting that on-site group know that we're going to be there sometime during that week. So during the actual review, if it's a desk monitoring review, the development's going to have 24 hours from the time of the file request to upload tenant files. The monitor will then review the files from their computer rather than at the property. If it's an on-site review, the monitors are going to need a space to set up their laptops. These need to be near electrical outlets, and that way we can review the tenant files. The lead monitor will provide the file request list at the time that we arrive. So we're going to come, we're going to say, hey, how are you? I'm Kara with TDHCA. This is Jasmine. We're here to monitor your tenant files. And we're going to say, here is the file list. Where would you like us to set up? There's like a whole conversation that happens, and we get you the file list then. So while the monitors are setting up, the on-site staff should begin to pull tenant files and take them to the monitors as they get them pulled so that the review can begin and end timely. We don't want to spend more time at your property than what's necessary. So say your review has 60 files and you get 10 of them pulled, bring those 10 to us and then keep pulling files. You don't have to wait until you have all 60 of them pulled. You don't have to wait until the entire stack is ready. They don't have to be in any kind of order because they probably won't be in an order when we return them to you. But as you get tenant files pulled, start bringing those to the monitors so that we can start reviewing tenant files. We will then review all the files provided and any additional documents requested or needed at the time of the review. So if we needed proof of a notary or look at the tenant rights and resources guide, we'll do that while we're there as well. And then after we've done all that, the lead monitor is going to conduct an exit interview. Now, these are not the exit interviews of pre-COVID. These are kind of a revamped exit interview. We're not going to go into specific issues of noncompliance, but we will go over some general strengths and weaknesses in the tenant files. I know, like my last trip, every property had a great review. The files were clean, everything was put away. So that was kind of what my exit interview consisted of. There wasn't a whole lot of other technical assistance that I could offer for the on-site folks. Everybody was pretty well doing what they needed to do, and the files were good and clean. And so if that's all that we give you at the end, that's not necessarily indicative that it was a bad review. That's just indicative that you guys are doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you've got a pretty strong file, and we are, going to address anything else in the monitoring review or in the monitoring report that you're going to receive. And then once you get that monitoring report, there may be additional information and stuff may have changed because we go through a peer review process. We double check our checklist. So if we thought something was an issue of noncompliance while we were on site, it may end up not being an issue of noncompliance. I know we've all had that happen where we come back and we look at it a little bit closer and we say, wait a second, we see this that we missed while we were on site. And so it turns out it's not an issue of noncompliance. So that's why we're not going into those details when we're on site. Are there any questions right now, Jasmine?
Yes.
Perfect.
Is there a way for us as managers to be able to find out when you may be coming out? Because sometimes we might not get the information.
So that's kind of what I was talking about a couple slides ago on the big star slide. that the management groups and ownership groups, we really rely on them to let you guys that are on site know that we're coming out. I think generally we're going to come every 3 years, but if we were at your property or did a review back in, you know, September of 2019, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be there September of 2022. We might be there in March, we might be there in December. It's just going to depend on kind of how the trips pan out. But you can kind of gauge every 3 years between reviews. That's, I think, a fair kind of, if you want some sort of ballpark idea. So if we came in 2019, expect us anytime in 2022.
Okay. What if we do not have every item that you requested? My husband and I are new owners, and this was our first desk review.
So if you get a notification and you don't have items that are listed there, reach out to the monitor. Or if you get a file list and you need to upload a tenant file, and you don't have everything, reach out to the monitor. That's going to be the best source for you because they're going to be able to give you advice on, you know, kind of how to proceed or what do they need. That's not really something I can answer as a blanket question because that's going to depend on the funding. Maybe it's something that we have, or maybe it's something that you can get and the monitor can give you, you know, information about that.
This one wasn't really a question. They just said that they were informed that we do not do exit interviews.
Yeah, so we don't do the exit interviews like we used to, where we sit down and we say, okay, this unit had this non-compliance, this unit had this non-compliance. What we do now is, so like when I finish a monitoring review, I'm going to say, thank you so much. Your files were in great order. Everything was there that we needed to look at. I did notice that it looks like your employment verification for this tenant file didn't have the email that corresponded to it. So make sure you're putting those in the tenant files when you have them. But otherwise, everything looks really great. So that might be an exit interview now, depending on, and that's just an example. Don't hold me to that. That's not from any specific property. There's going to be less of a unit 121 had this non-compliance, unit 122 had this non-compliance, and more of kind of a general feel for the files. And like I said a minute ago, if your files were great, then your files were great, and there's not a lot of input we can give you during an exit interview. That's an overview. We intend for those exit interviews to be kind of useful information that we noticed in the tenant files that maybe it's not going to be in the monitoring report, maybe it is going to be in there as technical assistance, but we want to use that as kind of a resource. And if you guys have questions for us that we can answer pretty quickly, that would be a good place to ask those as well.
Okay, if the property is post 15, do you come out every 3 years?
So if the property is post 15, that's going to shift to every 5 years unless there is a reason for us to come out sooner. And we have a very detailed post 15 training that's going to go into detail on that. But if you're a housing tax credit and you're post 15, but you're layered with home funds, we're still going to come every 3 years, or bond funds or whatever. Maybe you're a post 15 property that underwent an ownership change. We might come out sooner than the 5-year mark for that. So there's some different variables there.
Okay, and the last one, what is the purpose or goal for not providing the case file list until arriving?
The IRS says that we cannot provide the tenant files until the time of the review. So that is not an us review or an us rule. That is going to be an IRS requirement. And when they, release information, you're welcome to do a public comment on that. Because I think the idea is that all the files should be maintained in a compliant manner, and that if we give you a list of files when we get there, if we've given you that early, you're going to focus on those files and make sure they're perfect versus maintaining the files all the time because you don't know which ones we're going to pull or which ones we're going to review.
Yeah, one more.
Okay, we got one more question. Great.
If the property has more than TDHCA, like home or RD, is there a way to find out what is needed in the TDHCA file?
Yes, if you need to know or want to know what should be, so say you are layered with a HUD program, but you want to know specifically what needs to be in your TDHCA section for your tax credits, we have a checklist that I think Jasmine was instrumental in developing, and it's available on our website. We can put that link in the chat if that's something you guys want. And then, so you can follow that, or if you want to shoot me an email, I can send you kind of what we ask for when we do a desk monitoring review. But there are some good ways to divide those up, and we've got some groups that do it really well. We've got some groups that leave everything together and just pull out those EIV documents if they're HUD layered. So we're not super picky as far as what process you have, but we do like it when they are in, kind of if every file's in the same manageable order, then we're going to get through them without a problem and without issue. Do we have another question come through?
Yes. What is the latest that we will receive a report?
So our goal is to get a monitoring report out within 30 days, but different programs, some of those take a little bit longer to do the monitoring review. So if you don't have your monitoring review or your monitoring report within that 30 days after your review, reach out to that lead monitor and just say, hey, is there something else that you need? I just was anticipating having this by this point in time. And then the monitor can tell you kind of what's going on with that. So after the review, we're going to do a final review of all the documents and checklists. This is going to include any pre-on-site documentation that we didn't get a chance to review versus say we were pressed for time and we weren't able to get the full pre-on-site documentation reviewed before we came out. We're going to come back to the office and we're going to finish that part of the review. We're going to double check our checklist, and then we're going to write our monitoring report. That is going to address any issues of noncompliance found during the review. The letter may also offer some technical assistance that would be helpful in avoiding future noncompliance. We also use the technical assistance section as a way for us to tell you guys, hey, we've revamped the tenant rights and resources guide. Please be aware that the new version should be implemented no later than such and such date. That has not happened. That is an old example, so please don't panic and start redoing your tenant rights and resources guide. If the owner or owner's representative has questions about the monitoring report, please reach out to the monitor sooner rather than later to get any questions answered. If the development staff would like to have a detailed exit interview after they've read that full monitoring report and the detailed noncompliance report, this would be the time to ask for it. So if I come out to your property, I do a review, and then I issue a monitoring report, and you guys look at it about a week after I do the report, and you guys say, oh my gosh, I really don't understand what the issue is on this finding or on this issue of noncompliance. You can send me an email and I can say, okay, well, let's talk about that. And we can either talk about it through an email correspondence or we can have a telephone conversation, kind of depends on what the issue was. But it's very helpful if you read the entire monitoring report and all of the detailed noncompliance report, so that you've read what we've written and you've had a chance to kind of process that versus us kind of telling you what it says. We have questions before we
Yes.
keep going? Okay.
We do self-certs in the second year after move-in. Is this correct?
To do self-certs after move-in, that's going to be a program and property specific requirement or allowance. And so I can't answer that with a blanket statement.
Do you have a checklist with the documents required with move-ins and self-certs?
I think Jasmine put the link to the file checklist that we have built in the chat. So if you want to go to that website and kind of review that, that's going to be the best guidance we can give you as to what we would like to see or what we need to see in the tenant file.
Yes, that's all.
Okay. So there's kind of a flow. We're going to issue a monitoring letter, and if there are no events of noncompliance, we're going to close the review. We're going to tell you, the letter is going to say, here's what we found, here's when we were there, here's what files we looked at. We didn't have any issues of noncompliance. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again in 3 years or whatever the case may be. So there are three kind of types of monitoring reports. There's a no issues of noncompliance and no technical assistance. This is going to be a really short report because the monitors will not have identified anything that indicates that the property has any issues that need technical assistance. There's nothing going on with the department that we need to offer technical assistance on. This is going to be pretty cut and dried that, hey, your files looked good based off what we did. It's the owner's job to maintain continued compliance. And here's the files we looked at. Please let the monitor know if there's any questions. The next type is going to be one where maybe you didn't have any issues of non-compliance, but the monitor noted a few things that warranted being mentioned as technical assistance in the monitoring report. This is going to indicate that there's some areas that could become future issues of non-compliance if they are not addressed. So definitely read through that technical assistance that's in those reports and contact the monitor if there's any questions. But those are not just things that we put in there. Everybody's letter does not have the same issues of non-compliance. And so those are, and we don't have to put technical assistance in there. I meant technical assistance, not non-compliance, I'm sorry. So if the letter indicates technical assistance, pay attention to that, ask questions if you have them, and really try to kind of revamp whatever process is in place that cause the need for that technical assistance, or update kind of your processes that might prevent that from becoming an issue in the future. Because if we see, say Jasmine came out in 2019 and then I'm coming out next week and I see that in 2019 she told you that you were not handling your annual recertification requirements correctly, and she gave it to you as technical assistance because it wasn't enough to cause non-compliance, but it was something she noticed that might be future non-compliance. If I see the same thing when I'm out this next week, that is probably going to all be cited as non-compliance versus getting technical assistance every single time in a row. So some events of the third type of report is that you've had events of non-compliance and we've offered technical assistance or not. Sometimes those don't have technical assistance. This means that there were issues of non-compliance identified during the review, along with some noted items that the monitor wanted to further address or updates from the department. This letter is going to come with a detailed findings report to explain what the issue is or what the issues are and how to correct them. So this is kind of what a no issues of non-compliance report is going to look like. It's going to be pretty short. The first page is going to say the limited scope of the review did not result in any issues of non-compliance being identified. It's the owner's responsibility to maintain compliance. Please contact Carapoli with any questions. The second page is just going to say when we were there, who was there, and this particular one has technical assistance about whiteout. This is a complete example. This was not a real file letter. And then the files that were reviewed during the monitoring review. This letter is meant to communicate to the on-site staff and the management ownership what we did during the review and kind of what was covered, but there were no issues of non-compliance, so there's not going to be any attachments to this letter. If you have any questions, reach out to the lead monitor that issued the letter. So if you got a letter from me, you would email me for questions. You wouldn't email Jasmine because she didn't necessarily participate in the review. So she's going to have to do a whole lot of research to get your question answered. Whereas I'm probably going to be able to say, oh yeah, I remember that situation. Here's how to fix that for the future. So for the monitoring report with regards to technical assistance, some reasons for technical assistance might be changes in the program rules or requirement that are being noted in technical assistance, issues that could become future areas of non-compliance if they're not addressed, imperfect documentation. So maybe the file, you had one file that needed to have third-party verified assets and you only had 5 bank statements for the checking versus 6. We might not cite non-compliance, but we might give that as technical assistance. We might also cite non-compliance. It kind of depends on the situation of the tenant file. This might also provide you details that are going to further explain the issues of non-compliance on the detailed findings report. So if we are monitoring and there's an issue that needs a whole lot of backup information, we're trying to really keep that detail report clean. And so we might put the details as to like where the issue came from and where it's noted in statute. We might keep that in our technical assistance section versus it being in every single findings or non-compliance issue. So if you see that, that's another reason that it's important to review that technical assistance. This is also a place that anything else the monitor wants to make the owner aware of from the time of the review. So if I'm on site and your on-site folks ask for training opportunities, I might put a link for that in there. I might also indicate if there was a question on site that pertains to a specific training that we've already done, I might link the recording for it or a handout or something like that, or I might reference something in the rule that would be beneficial for the property to kind of pay special attention to. So it's a good place for us to relay information to you in a way that you have a chance to review it and really process it and then reach out with any questions. So for the monitoring report flow, when there are issues of noncompliance, we're going to issue the monitoring letter or monitoring report. We're going to note, it's going to note the issues of noncompliance. It's going to explain the type of noncompliance, the reason for it, and the specific corrective action required. The corrective action period is going to be identified. So if you get a letter, it's going to tell you by what date it should be uploaded. Your original corrective action period is going to be 90 days. It can be extended for up to 90 more days for good cause, and approval is needed. And the letter is going to tell you who to email if there is a compliance extension request needed. So the body of on this slide is kind of the pop out for the monitoring report. If we issue a report that indicates there are issues of noncompliance from the monitoring review, and there's going to be a few more steps to complete. So pages 1 and 2 are going to be informational and content, and they should be reviewed because they're going to have important dates and processes in them. It's going to tell you when the corrective action due date is and ask you what to upload. It's going to tell you to upload the documentation in that time frame. It's going to give you the contact for a compliance extension request if needed. And it's going to explain to you that we suggest submitting a cover letter just to kind of explain what's in your corrective action response, because sometimes we have questions or we don't understand why you submitted this one thing to cover this issue of noncompliance, and a cover letter just helps explain that. These first 2 pages are also going to indicate if there's any outstanding noncompliance issues from past reviews, and it's going to outline what those are, and then the findings report from that review would also be attached. So page 3 of this type of monitoring report is going to tell you, again at the top, that what day the review was conducted, who from the department conducted the review. It's going to tell you what events of noncompliance were cited and what units they affected. And then it's going to also tell you if there was any technical assistance. And then it's going to list out the files that were monitored. The last section offers some additional resources and links that are useful to anybody in connection with affordable housing. So any of our housing partners can benefit from those links. So if you've never looked at the links at the end of the letter, today might be the day that you should do that. The pages following this page of your monitoring report are going to be the ones that detail the issues of noncompliance, and they're going to look like this. So we're going to look at one in detail, unless we have questions. Jasmine, do we have any questions?
Yes. Okay. As a new manager, how do I know if my LURA is up to date?
Well, so when the property gets a LURA, that is in effect for however long of the LURA term. So at minimum, that's in effect for 30 years. We do have some properties that's going to be in effect for 60 years. So I'm going to be long since retired, I hope, before those expire. So the LURA starts with the property. So your LURA is not necessarily going to need to be up to date. CMTS would need to be up to date. And a lot of our properties have the LURA uploaded into CMTS. But if you don't have the LURA and the owner doesn't have the LURA and the management company doesn't have the LURA to give you a copy of it, send a monitor an email and we can kind of walk you through the process, or we can upload it into CMTS so that you can have access to it.
Okay. How does the owner's election of income averaging minimum set aside affect the file reviews? Will this be reviewed with the submission of the unit status report provided for the on-site review?
So if your owner has elected income averaging as the set aside for the property versus the 40 at 60 or 20 at 50, we are going to monitor that effectively the same way. We're going to do some testing before we come out to make sure that all lines up with what's required. And we do the same testing for anybody that's a 40% at 60% or a 20 at 50. We do all that testing with our pre-on-site review. So that we can, make sure that there's no issues with the set aside piece of it. If you have more questions on the income averaging, I don't want to get this training derailed on that. Shoot me an email, and if I can't answer your questions, I will get you to somebody that can.
That's
okay. So let's look at this detailed noncompliance report. So the first thing it's going to tell you is the finding of noncompliance, and this is just the issue as it is outlined in the chart at the back of the compliance monitoring rules. So for this example, it's non-compliance with utility allowance requirements described in section 10.614 of this subchapter and or Treasury Regulation 1.42-10. It's then going to tell you the date of the non-compliance. So this one, the date of non-compliance was 1/1/2022. So maybe they didn't submit back in 2021 for a properly implemented or properly calculated allowance. Maybe they just didn't get it implemented. We're not there yet. So the non-compliance date. The next section is going to tell you whether or not that's going to be reportable to the IRS on forms 8823. And this one, it says uncorrected, not reportable to the IRS. Correction date, on this one it's blank because it is still an issue that's outstanding, but the sometimes there are things that are an issue at the time of the on-site review or the pre-on-site document. Say the property didn't submit pre-on-site documentation when it was due, but they submitted it a couple days later. That might be the issue of non-compliance listed here, and it might be corrected on the date that it was submitted. So the correction date is not going to be filled in generally until after you start getting your corrective action responses. So then the reason for the non-compliance is going to be outlined. And like this one says, the development does not have a properly implemented utility allowance. So an example, like I told you on the TA, might have more backup documentation or more information. What we might have put for this issue of non-compliance, what we might have put in TA is kind of how to change methodologies or how to change utility allowances billed to tenants if that's something the owner's interested in. So this is going to be the reason. It's going to tell you kind of why the issue of non-compliance is there. And then the corrective action is going to tell you how to fix it, how to drop it, how to, if that's an option, or kind of how to correct it. If there's multiple options, it may say to correct, 1 parentheses, and then it might list off 1, and then there might be a second option to correct it. So you can see this one, it kind of tells you, how to correct that utility allowance non-compliance, and then it lets you know that any additional non-compliance might be addressed under separate cover. So if this had been a unit finding or a unit issue of non-compliance, it would have also stated the bin number, the unit number on there up at the top between non-compliance and reasons. So it would have had all that information. But this particular issue of non-compliance would be considered a property-wide issue and not be unit specific. So again, the detailed report is going to outline the specifics of each issue of non-compliance, the date, the status, whether or not it's reportable, the correction date, if it's applicable, the reason the issue of non-compliance came to be, and the corrective action required to fix it. If there are any questions on any of this, you definitely want to reach out to that lead monitor sooner rather than later. You don't want to wait until that 85th day of your 90 days to know when you need, what you need to do to correct it. So for corrective action, unless there are any questions on monitoring. Nope.
No.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. So the monitoring report is going to indicate a corrective action period of 90 days from the date of the letter. Please supply all requested documentation no later than that date, which is the last day of the corrective action period. If clarification is necessary to complete the corrective action, contact the monitor as soon as possible. The department may have the ability to extend corrective action for another 90 days, but it has to have good cause, and the request has to be received prior to the end of the corrective action period. If an extension to correct the events of noncompliance is needed, please send an email request prior to the corrective action end date to that email that's listed on the screen. This is also going to be in every monitoring report. The department recommends submitting a cover letter to explain the documentation submitted to address each event of noncompliance. And that just helps us to know kind of what you were thinking when you submitted it. So how to submit corrective action? You will upload that into the electronic document attachment system using the development CMTS account. This must be completed before the end of the 90-day corrective action period or by the deadline of the extension if one is granted. For instructions on how to use the attachment system, you can look to the online reporting section on our website, and that's going to have a how-to document there. And additionally, we have a training developed for CMTS. So if you run into issues, let me know. If you can't find that training on our website, I'm happy to get you directed there. So failure to submit complete and satisfactory corrections on or before the corrective action deadline will result in referral to the department's enforcement committee. And then let's talk a little bit more about what if 90 days is not enough. You can request that extension for an additional 90 days. You would need to upload a detailed corrective action plan. So say you had an ineligible household, but their lease is not up until February of 2023. Well, we don't want you to evict that household, but you would need to let us know that you've told them, hey, you don't qualify for our affordable housing program. You have to move out at the end of your lease. And then you would send us a statement that says, hey, we've given them this notice. Our plan is to have that back up and running by March 15th or April 1st, kind of depending on what the situation is or what your property's capabilities are. And that's going to tell us, that's going to be that corrective action plan. And then that's not acknowledged. And that's going to alleviate the referral aspect, but it's not going to take away that 8823 submission. So if for that example, that would still receive an 8823, but it's not going to be referred. So then when it's corrected, that 8823 would be updated to show corrected. So the detailed corrective action plan needs to include what's going to be done to correct the issue of non-compliance, how long it's going to take to correct it and get it completely finished, and when the owner anticipates completion of the corrective action and submission of the documentation to evidence completion. So if you know it takes you 30 days to get an apartment ready, don't tell us you're going to have it ready in 10 days and rent it in 10 days. So you would need to be real honest and complete with that corrective action plan. Are there questions so far?
Yes.
Okay, what you got?
What happens when we have uploaded the corrections and are waiting for a response? At what date mark, 30 to 120 days, should we email the monitor to get a response if we have not received anything in CMTS?
So if, say your corrective action date was due last week, but you uploaded it back in June or July, you're probably not going to get a response when you upload it, if you upload it early, because we do have kind of at this point, I don't want to say, we've got a lot of corrective action that's waiting to be reviewed, and we're reviewing it in the order that it was due. So if you've submitted your corrective action, I don't see any harm in emailing the monitor and saying, hey, my corrective action got submitted if it's after the due date. If it's before the due date, hang tight till the due date. You could email the monitor and say, hey, this got submitted. The due date was about a month ago. I just wanted to see if there was anything missing or if anything, and they might be able to get you an update. They might not. It might just not have been assigned yet. We do have a group of monitors that reviews corrective action, and then other monitors kind of step in and do corrective action reviews as time allows. So some of that it kind of just depends on, sometimes we stay really far ahead of the curve on that, and sometimes there's a lot that are due all at the same time, and it takes us a little bit longer to get through them. So we are going to issue a corrective action response. If all the issues are corrected by the submission, a closeout letter is going to be issued and no further actions required. If all the issues of noncompliance are addressed, but maybe not quite fully corrected, then we're going to give you 10 additional days to correct. And that is, you're going to get a letter, and it's going to tell you that in 10 days, you've got to have the rest of the submission. So maybe it was something that required a unit status report update, and the USR just missed a couple units getting updated. So we're going to tell you that in a 10-day letter. You're going to have 10 days to upload anything that was missing or correct anything else that was missing. And then that's still going to be corrected within the corrective action period. But if no response is received, the department is going to immediately refer the development to the enforcement committee. And if the corrective action submission, either initially or within the 10-day window, does not fully correct the issues of noncompliance cited during the monitoring review, the development is also going to be referred to the enforcement committee. So some suggestions to help avoid enforcement action: make sure that the development is meeting all calendar reporting deadlines. So there's quarterly vacancy reports that are due on the 10th of January, April, July, and October. The annual owner's compliance report is due every April 30th for the year prior. You want to check CMTS regularly to ensure that TDHCA correspondence is not accidentally missed and that any file or UPCS deadlines are calendared and adhered to. Failure to resolve noncompliance within the corrective action period will result in a referral for an administrative penalty and or debarment as per TDHCA Chapter 2, which was amended in 2021. So that's a relatively new requirement. An important note, in the TDHCA Section 2.401 little e 2 big A now calls for mandatory debarment for responsible parties with a referral ratio of 50% or more of actively monitored developments being referred to the Enforcement Committee on or after 4/1/2021. So if you only have 2 properties and one of those properties got referred in January of 2022, this now applies to you. So you want to be sure that you are paying attention to, as an owner and a management group, that you are paying attention to that CMTS and that you are adhering to any of those requests that might be submitted or requested or required. So some more information on the enforcement action. If a property is referred to the Enforcement Committee, owners should not ignore the referral or wait for legal to contact them. The best thing to do is to go ahead and get to working on the remaining noncompliance. You can email Isela Caseman and the referring monitor, and they can help explain kind of what's needed to correct it. And sometimes it's a quick oversight and it's an easy correction. There have been a lot of instances where somebody's gotten referred and 3 days later submitted exactly what was missing and said, oh my gosh, I just forgot, or I didn't realize that needed to come too, or whatever. And I let Isela know, hey, this referral is completed. Here's the finished product. The owner will also have to complete an owner acknowledgement of referral, and that is the actual owner. That is not the management group. That is not the on-site manager. That is somebody in the ownership group that needs to be completed by them and uploaded into CMTS. You will need to adjust internal management policies to ensure that similar referrals do not happen again. So if this got referred because nobody responded to the corrective action that was identified in the monitoring report, you want to make sure that you've got somebody that's always watching those compliance attachment systems for your properties, and make sure that anytime there's a monitoring report, you guys are uploading whatever's needed and taking the steps immediately that could help the owner avoid penalty action in many cases. So you want to be sure that you are paying attention to that CMTS system and uploading as requested and required. So the owner's acknowledgement of referral is a new form that is required as part of any referral. That's going to be a separate line item with the referral letter. So there will be 2 things uploaded kind of back to back. The form must be completed by the owner and not an owner's representative. The form is required as a result of the requirement for debarment for an entity with a referral ratio of 50% or more. CMTS must be current and correct with ownership entity contact information so that will allow the group to be notified of any correspondence from the department. So telling us that the email address goes to an old employee of the ownership group that's in CMTS, that's not going to be a reason to not have uploaded corrective action. That's still the owner's responsibility to make sure that those things are current and correct. Some tips to avoid debarment. There's a technical support document that can be found at the link that's right there in the middle of the screen on the second bullet. And this is going to outline, but it's not all inclusive, but it's going to outline kind of what is required of the owner and make the owner aware of all applicable TDHCA statutes, rules, and LURA terms. It is vital that owners and management groups proactively edit their internal management policies and take all necessary actions to ensure complete and timely compliance, since failure to do so could cause the owner to be debarred if too many properties in their portfolio are referred. The above link should help with that. There are levels of debarment, and compliance does not have any control over this. So don't email me or Amy or Wendy about debarment. That is all handled by the Enforcement Committee. We do not determine who's going to be debarred. We merely complete the monitoring reviews and upload the appropriate documentation as required and necessary, and then the Enforcement Committee kind of takes it from there. There are also previous participation reviews that are required anytime there's new funding or a new syndication. So if anybody affiliated with the development submits an application for new awards, funds, or a transfer, a PPR or a previous participation review is going to be conducted in accordance with those requirements that are outlined there in those two sections. If there is a monitoring review open at the time of the PPR, then, and if that's reached the end of the corrective action period, the department will review any corrective action submission uploaded to CMTS, and a response will be issued to the development and the outcome taken into consideration by the PPR contact in their assessment. There's typically a 7-day period for this review, so timely submissions and communication are essential. Non-compliance that was corrected after the applicable corrective action period and non-compliance that has not been corrected will be taken into consideration when conducting a PPR for a 3-year period, starting on the date of the correction. Monitoring reviews with non-compliance corrected after the corrective action period will result in events of non-compliance during a PPR assessment. However, failure to submit any type of corrective action or response during the designated corrective action period also plays a significant role in the PPR assessment. So you want to be sure that you are reaching out to the monitors and get questions answered so that you can respond timely to those corrective action requests. So some notes for success: communication is key. You want to make sure that CMTS is current and correct with information for all parties. You want to ask questions when given the opportunity while the monitor conducts the exit interview for the monitoring review. And you want to contact the monitor when the monitoring report is received after a review has been conducted if there are any questions. Please read the report before you contact the monitor. There's nothing more frustrating for everybody involved than when you guys, and I'm not saying that this happens a whole lot, but if you get the monitoring report and you call us immediately and say, hey, Kara, I see that you have a finding in here or an issue of noncompliance in this monitoring report. What's the deal? And you don't really know anything about it. That tells me that you didn't read it, and all of your questions are going to be geared towards stuff that's maybe already been addressed. So make sure you read it beforehand, then call us so that we can discuss it further, or email us so that we can discuss it further. You want to be sure that you read that report and the noncompliance report carefully and completely. They may all look the same, but the information does change, and sometimes the letters change. So it's important that you read that and you're receiving our communication fully. You want to then respond to the monitoring report as required in order to avoid being referred unnecessarily. As soon as the monitoring report is uploaded into CMTS, the corrective review the report internally and ask questions early on so that you do have as much of the 90 days to work on the corrective action response. You also might want to conduct a review of the corrective action response before it's submitted to CMTS. If the on-site staff puts together a response that's not reviewed by the owner and management group, it may result in undue delays in correcting the issues, and that's not going to be a reason that we would give an extension. So you want to be sure that those are going through a peer review process or a third-party review or a management group review or an ownership review so that you can try to make sure those are as correct as possible and include everything that's requested. So what happens if you don't agree? Here's one option. This is actually a pair of the dogs that belong to a monitor, and the red one is super nice. The black and brown one is a little bit more feisty. But really, there are some avenues if you don't agree with the monitor. So if you get the monitoring report and you're like, hey, I don't think this should be an issue of noncompliance, email the monitor and say, hey, I don't think this should be an issue of noncompliance. What can we do? The monitor's probably going to have a real candid conversation with you because we're all human. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe you guys are overlooking something. Maybe we overlooked something. And then the monitor can also bring in the director of compliance monitoring and the manager of compliance monitoring to assist if needed to help us come to a resolution. If we still cannot reach a resolution, we will reach out to the National Center for Housing Management, also known as NECHM, for income and asset questions or inclusions or exclusions. And we reach out to them anytime there's something that's new, like how to handle cryptocurrencies or how to handle social media influencers, that kind of thing, that might come up. The Internal Revenue Service is going to be where we reach out with housing tax credit specific program concerns. And the HUD field office is where we're going to reach out for multifamily direct loan specific program concerns. So we thank you for attending today's training. I know we've got some questions, so we'll go through those. If you didn't ask your question or you didn't get it answered, please feel free to type it in the chat or in the questions box now. I also have 2 links on this page now. One of them is to the manuals and rules, and one of them is to the previously recorded presentations. And my meme has definitely, is no longer effective because it's not 110 degrees outside anymore, but I still feel like Texas doesn't have winter. What do we have questions wise? I'm going to open the questions box.
You ready?
Oh, yep. What you got?
Isn't there a minimum of 5+ assets for the 50% mandatory debarment hearing?
I'm going to ask you to email me that question so that I can forward that to Isela and she can get you a better response for that.
With over 60 properties in CMTS, is there a way for the homepage to show new uploads maybe turn red or added to the property name to alert that a new document has been uploaded?
So when you go to each property in the attachment system, new documents are going to be highlighted in yellow until they are opened. But that's kind of the only thing I know of. And you get an email notification. So I would definitely figure out a process to look through those and make sure that those email notifications are coming through and are being looked at.
I do have
Amy's
something.
going to jump in.
We are in the process of doing a major update to CMTS. One of the things that we will be doing once we can complete the update is we will be cleaning up some of the attachments in the attachment system. Over COVID, a lot of files were uploaded that no longer need to sit there and use space. So we're going to do some cleanup of that. But one of the things in the enhancement is that there are going to be certain documents that will be pinned at the top of the attachment system. So when you open it up, you will always see your land use restriction agreement, your 8609s, ownership transfers, stuff like that. And then any of the notifications will fall in date order below that. But at any time currently and even after the enhancements, you can always click the date and it'll sort by date, like the earliest to the latest. So you can see the most current stuff on top.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Yes, that is going to be good once that gets started. I'm going through and catching up with where the questions are. So I think the next one is, what if we have submitted documentation on the corrective action? Oh, nope, we already answered that one. So are there any new questions, Jasmine?
Okay. Since we're new owners, can we request an on-site review instead of a desk review to ensure that we have everything you're requesting?
I don't actually know the answer to that. Amy, do you know the answer to that? I think the answer is going to be no.
The answer is that the majority of our reviews are in-person reviews. We just have a very few that we do via desk review. Being a new owner will probably mean that we would do an actual in-person review, unless there's something that, I have staff that sometimes gets ill, or, we're still dealing with the same stuff you guys are. COVID is still a thing. I'm not going to send a sick positive tested monitor to your property, so it may change to a desk review, but for the most part, especially if we know that there's a new owner, it will be an in-person review.
Thank you, Amy. So it looks like the next question is, what if we have submitted documentation of the corrective action and a few months have gone by and we've not heard from the department on the resolution or cleared finding language? I would say reach out to the monitor that originally conducted the review. And if you're not sure who that is, send me an email and I can look into it for you and see if I can't get your response there. Anisela offered a clarification with regards to the 50% referral threshold. She said that the 50% referral threshold for department applies to portfolios that include 5+ properties. Less than 5 properties are okay. Oh, so my example would have been wrong. So if you had 6 properties and 3 of them had been in referral, that's when that would come into play. The next question is when you say that if the review is scheduled for a Thursday, you could come on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, how should I handle the 24-hour notice to my residents? Should I just give a week notice for the whole, should I just give notice for the whole week? So for a file review, you don't have to notify your tenants because we're not going into their units. For a physical inspections review, I think they adhere a little more closely to those notifications or for those date requirements when they're coming. But that would be a question that I can get an answer for you from the physical group. And if you want to email me that question, and you can always ask the person that reaches out to you that says they're going to be there on September 15th to perform a physical inspection. You could always ask them, hey, is there any chance you're going to come early, or is that 15th date set in stone? Okay, so for the next question is that for a property that is going through resyndication, how soon from when the project placed in service will you come out to do a compliance audit? So if you are going through a resyndication and maybe you got new funds in 2021 and your old funding source, the review was going to be due in 2022, we might come out and review in 2022 for the old part, and then we might come back in 2023 to review the new resyndication. Amy can jump in there if that's bad information or if that process has changed.
Yeah, we're running across that a lot where we did one last year, we've done one this year, and then the recertification wasn't complete, or the resyndication wasn't complete, and so we didn't review it, and then we have to go back. So that is kind of something newer, even for us, that we're kind of going back early because we're getting a lot of resyndication, which is really good because that, our low-income housing stock out there is getting older. So resyndication is a great way to preserve this affordable housing. So it's great, but yes, we are kind of doing some back-to-back. Now, recently, I just did one the last month, at the end of the month, it might have been the beginning of this month, that I reviewed their resyndication during this review. I was going out for their post-15 review. Originally, my original file count was 5 files that I was going to look at, and I noticed the resyndication was complete and that I was going to be able to do a review of that. And so I did review it as a whole. And so we adjusted that on the travel schedule so we don't have to go back out.
Okay, so there's some different scenarios that go with that, but thank you, Amy. I don't see any other questions. If anybody has any, feel free to type those real quick. Otherwise, I will close this down. This training has been recorded and will be posted on our website probably early next week or late this week. So if you wanted to rewatch it or share it with other staff members, you could definitely do that. Amy, did you have anything else to add?
Oh, I thought this was a great training. Thank you, everybody, for putting it together, Karen, Jasmine, and thank you, everybody, for listening. And I know you're going to have great reviews.
Thank you, guys. And if you think of a question later, feel free to email me. I'm always happy to help. I hope you all have a great rest of your week.